Just talking with Tom. Turn your dial to cable 18. You will see the best in TV. Just talking with Tom. Just talking with Tom. Sit back and listen. You will hear the best conversation of the year. Just talking with Tom. Just talking with Tom. Just talking with Tom. Just talking with Tom.
Welcome to Talking with Tom. I'm Tom Dacey alongside Eddie McCarver. Hello, Edward.
Hello, Tommy. How are you?
Good, good.
As we leap into a brand new year, it's good to be back here at the friendly confines here at WPAA.
Start of year 22 for me.
Yeah, and good for you. I don't know what year for me. I've lost count, so longer than my marriage, I think, but I don't know. It's been a long time.
I'm excited about the show we have this evening.
Yeah, this will be interesting.
As you know, I am a resident of the Wallingford Housing Authority, and our guest this evening gives me a great pleasure to officially welcome to Talking with Tom the Executive Director of the Wallingford Housing Authority, Kelly Mcdermott.
Hi, Tom.
Welcome, Kelly.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Welcome, Kelly.
Nice to meet you, Ed.
Kelly, I just want to ask you, where did you come from before you came to Wallingford Housing Authority?
Ooh, that can be a long answer. I live in Middletown, Connecticut. I grew up in Middletown. When I was younger, my father grew up in Wallingford, so we spent up until I was in kindergarten here in town, and then sort of moved over to Middletown. But for work-wise, I previously was with the East Hartford Housing Authority for about 3.5 years as their manager of planning and modernization. And before I was with the East Hartford Housing Authority, I spent a good portion of my career for the city of Bridgeport. Right out of college, I took a job in their grants department and ended up all the way through their community development division as their department head down there for a while.
What does a grants department involve? And then I mentioned a city like Bridgeport, which is compared to Wallingford or East Hartford, I think, is a huge city, isn't it?
Yeah, so Bridgeport's the largest city in the state. When I was working there, we had about 140,000 residents, and because the city is so large, we had access to a variety of federal resources to support municipal activities across all different types of functions, whether it supported the Board of Education, our Department of Public Health, our engineering staff, the public library. And when you're pursuing competitive federal dollars across various departments in an organization that large, we had a central grants department, and I was a team member there and coordinated the access to those applications and the submission of those funding resources.
Now, when did you officially come on board in Wallingford?
I started in May of this year. May 4th of 2015 was my first day.
Also, so you're year number one.
I'm in year number one. I am almost 8 months through. Yeah, it's been great.
The new kid on the block, as we say.
That is true, yes.
What's the big difference between, you know, when I think Bridgeport, you say, is the largest city in Connecticut. Wallingford is a town. But are the problems, are the issues the same in each community, just on a grander scale? Or?
I think no matter where you go, affordable housing is always going to be a community need. And what's interesting is within a city like Bridgeport, you can drive through and sometimes visually see the need for either housing rehabilitation or the need to enhance the existing housing stock, or you understand that their public housing portfolio is just large because of the size of that city. And when you come into a town like Wallingford that is you know, smaller in nature, it's got a lower resident population, that doesn't mean that that community need doesn't necessarily exist. You know, folks need affordable housing no matter where we are. So I think that need isn't so much the question, but as how much is actually in that community that creates the visual element to housing.
Do you want to give us a little history on the Wallingford Housing Authority?
Yeah, absolutely. I can do that for you guys. Presently, we manage 317 units here in the town of Wallingford. And those units are in 6 different developments. And all of them were built at various different times in Wallingford's history. But to back up before that, the Housing Authority was actually established in 1947 here in town.
Oh, wow.
Housing authorities are authorized by municipal ordinance. However, we operate as a standalone quasi-governmental agency. We're not necessarily a 501c3 nonprofit, and we're not a governmental municipality, but we are a government institution. And so the town of Wallingford determined there was a need for an organization to provide affordable housing programming. So we were established in 1947. And our first site that was developed was our moderate rental family site, the Earlbrook Heights neighborhood, which is located on Wharton Brook Drive, Lewis Circle, and Tremper Drive over by Lyman Hall High School. So we have 132 units of family housing there. And that's 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedroom units. And then in 1966, the Housing Authority built Eastside Terrace. And Eastside Terrace is a community of 30 units of housing, studios and 1 bedroom, specifically for elderly disabled residents. And what I found so interesting is that all of us here in Wallingford know it as Eastside Terrace, but one of its original names was actually Fen Brook. And I just thought that was so interesting.
I didn't know that, because I was wondering too, because I've been over there and I noticed that it's actually on Fenbrook.
Yes. So.
Now, was Fenbrook the name of an individual, or just what it used to be? Or?
I don't know, but the street near it that it's actually on is Fenbrook.
Yeah. So anyway, there's a little bit of an interesting history to the name that, I don't know the whole story behind it, but Eastside Terrace has 2 names. That's not the only site. But from there, in 1969, we built Southside Terrace, which is right next to and off of Wharton Brook Drive, kind of hidden down behind the Lyman Hall track. And that's 40 units of elderly housing. And in 1972, we went and built McGuire Court up off of Old Durham Road near Rock Hill School, Elementary School, up on the hill. That's 50 units. That's our largest development aside from our family unit. Okay. And McGuire Court's the other property that has a second name. So I don't know if either of you guys know that name or not, or want to take a guess at that name. It's a really nice name.
No, I don't want to. Where's it located?
It's off of Old Durham Road by Rock Hill School, and I don't know if the location gives away the name, but it's also referenced as Burke Heights.
Oh, I should have guessed that because that's what they call the bus route.
Oh.
For that area.
Okay, the Burke Heights. So I think that's the Burke Heights neighborhood.
Oh, okay.
And that might actually, I'm not sure exactly what that name references, but if you look at all of our old assistance agreements with the state of Connecticut, they reference Burke Heights. And I got here and I'm going, where's Burke Heights? We don't own Burke Heights. Because, you know, in Wallingford, we refer to it as McGuire Court. So I thought that was a really kind of cool thing that I learned.
I should have guessed that.
And then our newest development, before I get there, in 1980 we built McKenna Court, which is where Tom lives, over here on Prospect Street and Washington Street.
And that I remember, because that used to be the old Washington Elementary School.
I believe it was.
So,
So that's 30 units of elderly disabled units. And what's different about McKenna Court is it is our only federally assisted property.
We're under HUD.
Yes. So HUD oversees McKenna Court, although it was built with state housing portfolio dollars. All of our other properties are overseen by the state of Connecticut Department of Housing and CHFA. So McKenna Court's our little unique spot here in Wallingford. And then in 1990, the agency was successful in acquiring some land and built John Savage Commons, which is 35 units of elderly disabled housing. Off of Martin Avenue, you can also access it from Bayberry Lane. If you're on Ward Street and you take Bayberry, there's kind of like a little
I know what it is.
down into the valley over there.
That's a nice complex over there.
It's really beautiful over there. And I'll tell a quick story. I like stories like Tom likes to tell stories. So I'm at John Savage Commons this morning, actually, because our maintenance staff are doing some really fantastic work leveling out sidewalks before we get to the winter season. We have a lot of tripping hazards when you have concrete sidewalks and they settle, so it creates a tripping hazard. So they're doing great work over there. I'm going to check on them and say, great job, guys. And as I'm driving out, there's this huge bird. And I thought it was a hawk, and I was with our resident services coordinator, and Martha was like, I don't know if that's a hawk, but it was this gigantic bird, and it was sitting in the middle of the road as we're leaving to go out Martin Avenue to Center Street. And I'm like, I'm going to get a picture. I'm going to take a picture. So I'm inching the car up, and that bird just looked at me, and it was literally from here to where you are, Ed, and I got a picture of it before it flew away.
Nice.
And I said, this is amazing. So John Savage is kind of in this really nice nature sanctuary. In fact, all of our sites are on beautiful pieces of land here in Wallingford. So our residents are very lucky to have that type of environment that they get to call home.
I like looking at the duck pond when I go up to Savage.
Yeah. So that's kind of our units and our portfolio. We manage some other programs, but I also wanted to show you guys a really neat find that I have uncovered since I've been here. If you haven't guessed already, I'm very interested in the history of the Housing Authority, how we came to be where we are. And when you're established in 1947 and you go through a series of directors and now a lot of changes in management and things get shuffled around, it's hard to find and hold on to some of those pieces of history. So I was doing just some poking around, and I found this really great poster. And let's see if I can hold it up so everybody can see it.
Nice shot. Yeah.
And this was made by one of our residents in the 1990s. And I just thought it was so great that, you know, the community that we have in Wallingford, it really is a community. Our residents communicate with each other all the time, and we have these great events, and this is such an amazing piece of history. And to have one of our residents...
And look at that. It even says McKenna Court Gym.
McKenna Court Gym, which is now our maintenance garage.
I was going to say, they still have some of the basketball hoops hanging up in there.
They do. If you go into our maintenance garage, you're going to see some basketball hoops. You might see kind of where the old stage used to be in that... in their garage, but it's really cool. It's
I remember when
neat.
the Boys Club over on Grand Street, I think, used that as a gym before that. Yeah.
So I guess that's a little touch on history.
What about our community room? Was that part of the...
I think your community room might have been a bump out, but I can't say that for sure. And you know who would know that is our maintenance staff would know the history of that.
Because I often wondered, because I know, you know, our office that we have there actually says office on the door.
Yeah. So it might be original to that building. I'm not sure.
So you actually found that picture just kind of stuffed away in the woodwork?
So one of the other programs we manage is the sale of Housing Opportunity District homes in Old Oak Village, which is off of Ward Street. It's a newer development, and they're home ownership units. And I had actually gone into our basement to look for the original agreement we had with the town of Wallingford on how we were supposed to administer that program. Just for various reasons, I wanted to have that original document. And as I'm going around looking for that, I find this box, and in this box is just old photographs, old scrapbooks, posters, and junk, some old junk, you know. It's just a mishmash, old programs, and these posters, the originals, were in that box, and I've got 4 of them framed up in the office right now, and, you know, hopefully in the coming months as we spend more time down there sorting everything out, maybe we'll find more. It's kind of really awesome. Yeah. It's really awesome.
That is cool. It's like something they did, I know, in the recent Celebrate Wallingford, what they did at the stores going down Center Street in Wallingford, found pictures of what the stores used to look like in years gone by, and they put it up, and I'm thinking it would be same with the
I've got some great pictures of what we look like in the 90s and, you know, in the 80s. Yeah, the old cars on the sites.
Was it a lot different?
Yeah, dramatic.
I can remember now that you're saying that, Jerry Bronner found some pictures back at McKenna of some of the old get-togethers they used to have in the community room over there, some of the old neighbors.
Yeah. I'll have to ask her about that.
We were talking before the show, and I'm old enough to remember Tom McKenna. He was a representative years ago.
Yeah.
So.
Well, what's great about this community in Wallingford is that the word affordable housing or the housing authority has never been tainted in a negative way, and we've always been a piece of the fabric of this community, which is really fantastic. And it's great to be in an environment where we do feel connected as a resource and as a partner in town. Yeah.
You bring up a good point. Is when you think housing authority, it's not right that brings up a negative image. When you think housing authority, you think...
I don't know. I think that's on everyone's perspective, you know. I have some of our residents who, you know, favor one site over another for whatever that, you know, assumption that they have or however it was created. And I think what's really interesting is that when I came here to start in May, you know, the housing authority is colored a lot by what is written about it in the media and in the newspapers. And, you know, you do a little bit of research and you see that the past 3 years hasn't been very easy for the housing authority.
Yeah, I have to say, you had a lot to deal with when you came in.
Yeah, and
it wasn't. It was run by another community, wasn't it? Run by
New Haven.
New Haven before.
We had a series of hurdles to overcome as an organization, which began with some transitioning of executive leadership and then executive management of the housing authority. And we lost our longtime executive director. So in a short-term solution, we brought on a management company which didn't work out, and then the housing authority utilize the resources of the New Haven Housing Authority under a memorandum of agreement and understanding that would be short-term support to make it through until they got to the point where they could bring another full-time director back on board.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I do think that a lot of the residents felt at the time that's what the housing authority needed, was a full-time executive director.
Yeah. You'd be surprised. There's a lot of work for 317 units.
Really?
Yeah.
We're talking with Kelly Mcdermott, the Executive Director of the Wallingford Housing Authority. Now, you mentioned earlier McKenna Court is actually funded federally, and the rest of the units are state-funded, so there's no town money that goes into it? Am I correct on that? Or?
Right. So the Housing Authority doesn't necessarily receive operating subsidy on our state units either. I can give you kind of an overview of how we operate as an organization and where our sources of revenue come from. Okay. And as a housing provider in town that owns real estate, we do pay a payment of taxes to the town of Wallingford every year. It is an adjusted payment in taxes. It's called a pilot payment. We don't pay full tax value.
In lieu of taxes, right?
In lieu of taxes.
Okay.
Pilot. But we do make a contribution annually to the town, and that depends on what our rental revenue is and the utility costs at our site. Our primary source of revenue into the agency is our rent collection. So if you are a resident at our family site, Robrook Heights, or at any one of our elderly sites, John Savage Commons, Southside Terrace, Eastside Terrace, or McGuire Court, you're going to be paying rent to us, and we receive zero to a very small amount of operating subsidy to cover the difference. Our properties operate on what's called a base rent system. So when you apply to the housing authority, at any of those sites you will never be paying more, or I mean less than what our base rent is. And our base rent and it depends on the site, but it varies from $390 to $400 depending on what site you're at.
Okay.
So no matter what, you will always pay our base rent. And if you have an income that supports at 30% of your adjusted gross income the ability to pay more than that base rent, that's what you pay. Now, if you apply to the housing authority and you cannot afford base rent, your 30% of adjusted gross income says, well, I should only be paying $100 as a resident. The state of Connecticut offers what's called an elderly rental assistance program for those sites. And we're not guaranteed funding every year to cover that deficit, but a lot of times what happens is the state will cover that gap in between what the resident can afford and what our base rent is. And so the housing authority's budget is built off of our base rent structure because we know we're going to get that difference from the state to cover that that gap. Now, our McKenna Court property is HUD assisted, and so what happens is we set our rent for those units. And I don't know them off the top of my head sitting here, but if a one-bedroom at McKenna Court is $800, the resident will only pay 30% of their adjusted gross income no matter what. If that's $1, if that's $0, if that's $50, and then HUD covers the difference under our contract with HUD. So we have full subsidy at McKenna Court, and that's the difference.
Okay.
That's a lot of information, and I know it's a little bit complicated, but if anyone's ever interested in our rental structure, we're happy to, share it. We keep all that information in our administrative office on 45 Tremper Drive, and anyone that comes in has access to it.
Now, who would be eligible to apply for housing?
So the Housing Authority maintains waiting lists. There's a large need for the units we provide in town, and we will open that waiting list as need be. When the waiting list drops to less than 10 people, we automatically open it up to the public. The waiting list is open for a period of 60 days, and during that time period, you can submit an application to the Housing Authority.
Did you say there was a waiting list now? Or?
Yes. All of our sites operate on a waiting list system. So we actually just closed our elderly disabled waiting list in November, and we received a good number of applications, but once your application comes in and the time clock closes, we do a random selection to create the order. And we use a computer-generated system that spits out, if you put your application in as number 1, then we pull them out based on the order.
So it's a lottery, more or less.
It's a lottery.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And you will remain on that waiting list until your name comes up on that waiting list. And we have a process of how we communicate with you and how you are informed about where you are on that list. But we don't have an open application because our lists are quite lengthy.
Is there like, I don't even know if this is like an average wait time. If I was on a waiting list, would it be like 6 months to a year or longer?
Depends on where you are. So right now, our one-bedroom waiting list is about 125 people deep. Wow. And if you were number 125, you would be on that list for a number of years. In general, years. Okay. In general, the Housing Authority turns between 3 to 5 units a month in our portfolio. Okay. So if you think about that on an annual basis, you're not going to see that list dissolve for probably 3.5 years or so. For every 5 people on that list, we usually have 1 successful application. Wow. Meaning either it's difficult for us to contact that person, or the person never responds in time, or they don't qualify for whatever reason in our selection criteria, and we move on to the next person. So about 1 in 5 people we pull everybody off the list, but it's generally 1 in 5 will be housed.
Wow.
Yeah. Which is interesting, right?
Did not know that.
Yeah.
Do people put their name on the list there and just kind of, I don't want to say not serious, but have other options?
Yeah,
in case, while I'm here, I'll put my name on the list and then...
Yeah, I think so. The Housing Authority receives a lot of calls, unfortunately, for emergency housing, which we don't offer. And so if you're a person in need of housing and affordable housing, to wait 3.5 years is a long period of time. So we do connect folks to other resources that exist and other providers within the general area, especially if you're in need of emergency housing.
I know I was on the list for quite a while because I happened to luck out when I got my place at McKenna, because where I was living previously, I had filled out the application while I was living there a few years back. Well, my landlord decided to put my unit up for sale. And then I happened to get the phone call from the Housing Authority saying that the unit was available.
And that is good timing.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, thank God.
Right. So I brought in some statistics for from the town of Wallingford, if you're interested in our rental market a little bit here.
Actually, we have just under 5 minutes. I know we're going to have you back. We're going to do a second show, but I wanted to ask.
Sure.
people that wanted information about the Housing Authority, is there a website? Is there a phone number or email address?
Absolutely. Our office is located on 45 Tremper Drive. We're open Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., and on Thursday we have extended hours until 5 p.m. Okay. If folks are not able to get to our office, our main telephone line is 203-269-5173. And again, that line is running during business hours. Okay. We unfortunately don't have a website, but if you go to the Town of Wallingford's website, we do have a page that puts that same information out there for everybody. Okay. So you can get our phone number, our address, a listing of all of our properties on the town's website as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and it gives the breakdown of how many units in each complex.
Yes, it does. Yep.
Okay, good. Good. So.
Good. But let's see. Anything else we want to touch on briefly before we end? I know you're going to be back on the next show to talk a little more about the programs for the residents.
Yeah, sure.
But is there anything else you want to touch on here?
Absolutely. I'll tell you about 2 more quick things. The Housing Authority will most likely be opening up its waiting list for its McKenna Court property at some point during the month of January. So you should keep an eye out and your ears out. We will publicly notice that in the paper, in the Meriden Record-Journal on 2 separate occasions, and we will notify the Town of Wallingford, so if they can get it on their website too, we'll make sure that that happens. Okay. So that's the first kind of quick announcement. The second thing that I just want to mention really briefly is that the Housing Authority, beyond its portfolio, also manages a Section 8 program. And Section 8 is it's the Housing Choice Voucher Program under HUD, and we hold a separate waiting list for that program where folks who are called up on that waiting list will receive a voucher and have the ability to choose their own housing within town.
I was going to say, that's the floating voucher?
Yeah, so they carry that voucher with them, they select their rental unit in the private market, and that acts as a subsidy to support their cost of living in that rental unit. And so the Housing Authority, and a lot of people may not know this, maintains a list of active rental properties in Wallingford. So if anyone's ever interested in other units that are available to rent, we do have that list. Or if landlords are interested in listing their property with the Housing Authority, we do also offer a form for them to fill out so we can keep that information. It's a great resource.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good to know.
So, excellent.
Good to know.
So. Well, that was the quickest 27 minutes and 15 seconds we have here, and we must have you back.
Great. I would love to come back.
She will be back on the next show with us.
Were you nervous about coming on?
No, you know what? I love to talk about the Housing Authority, and I love to talk about all the great work that we do. I think when you lead an organization that is mission-driven, you have to have a passion to do what you're doing. And I can say with great resolve that I love what I do, and I love being here in Wallingford. So I can talk about the Housing Authority all day.
Well, I think in the 25 minutes we've had so far, you certainly have shown that. You know, usually we've had musicians on, we've had athletes on, and they do talk about the passion in their craft and in their job. I think when we had Mary Ellen Eccles on over the summer for the
Happy Days play that you were in.
Happy Days play. You could see the passion that she had, and I could see it in you.
Yeah.
So that's so good for you.
Thank you.
Good for you. So. All right, Tom, I think, excuse me, we should call it a do for our first show for the new year. We want to thank
you, Kelly.
Pleasure,
McDermott.
Tom. Thank you for having me.
Yep, we will see you sooner than you think. So.
Oh, okay.
Kelly will be joining us on our next show, so stay tuned for that. We want to thank everybody for joining us. Ed?
Thank you.
A pleasure as always.
Our crack staff.
Thanks to Tom and Alan back there.
Alan, their usual yeoman job back there.
We want to say good night to everybody, and thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Just talking with Tom. Talking with Tom. Turn your dial to cable 18. You will see the best in TV. Just talking with Tom. Just talking with Tom. Sit back and listen. You will hear the best conversation of the year. Just talking with Tom. Just talking with Tom. Just talking with Tom. Just talking with Tom.